Welcome everyone to the fourth session of the EWOC Organizer Training Program. We're already almost at the end, which is kind of crazy. So where are we? So, now that we've gone through the identification, to create your organizing committee, using that committee to assess and map your workplace. We talked about the conversations you should have to enable those assessments and, to build your support. And now, if you have you got some support, so how do you use that? How do you go public and make your demands known? And after this week, we'll go into inoculation and countering the boss narrative. So at this point, if you are interested in becoming a mentee, in shadowing more experienced organizers and eventually taking on your own campaigns, then you'll get an exam once you take all 5 trainings. Once you pass, you'll get a form to fill out just to sort of reflect what your experience is. And then we'll match you with one of our great advanced organizers, regardless of how much experience you have. If you have any questions, you can email workerorganizing@gmail.com.
All right, so let's get going on this thing, guys. All right. So, well, one of the things we're going to be talking about today is sort of escalation and public action. And exactly what does that mean? All right. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go through this sort of like slides and talk about, what particular campaigns and what particular tactics we're going to use in terms of escalating whatever actions that you have. Right. So, the first thing, okay, and one of the most primary goals of any sort of organizing campaign that you guys are going to be doing is, you want to move your campaign forward, all right? It's important to build solidarity and also radicalize your coworkers. It's important, it's one of the things that's important is to have as many people that are in the workplace involved in this kind of struggle. So if you have like 50 people at your workplace, you want to get at least 75, 80% of those 50 people to be a part of some sort of like organizing campaign, right? Because as you see here, it says there's strength in numbers. It is difficult for the bosses to move on like a large group of people. They can move on, maybe 1 or 2 folks, but when you have majority of the workforce involved in a campaign, then they must take that seriously. So that's why you want strength. There's strength in numbers. If there's about 50 people, you want the majority of that group that's going to be involved. All right. Now, once you have what the issues are, and that you have the majority of people in your workplace who are part of this, all right, who do you go to? Now, if you're in a smaller sort of workspace, there may be a manager, okay? And there may be a supervisor as well. So what's going to be important is to find out who has the power to make decisions, okay? Usually the person who can hire and fire are the people with the power, usually, okay? Now, there are some times when not only do you have to go after managers, but you may have to go after the CEO of a company or a corporation, right? Or some managing director. But it's always someone who has the power to give you what you want. And that's going to be really important, okay? That whoever that decision maker is, he or she has to have the power to give you what you want, whatever those demands are, okay? All right? Now, what's also important in terms of escalating is, the bosses always have all the power. What's going to be important is in any sort of struggle that we're in is that the people have the power and the workers have the power. Now, those workers and people need to exercise what the power that they have. Without your labor, the bosses can't do anything, okay? Now, they'll say, all right, we will replace you, but it's sometimes difficult for them to do that, okay? But we'll come back to that, all right? All right, so when we talk about escalation, all right, it's going to be important to understand these sort of 3 areas of organizing, okay? One is talking to your coworkers about what the issues are, all right? An example, if you're in a workplace that's based on the COVID crisis, that people want hazard pay. Well, a majority of workers say they want hazard pay, Okay. The majority of workers say that, hey, you know what? We want 5 paid days off. Okay. So you want to talk to your coworkers about what those issues are. But those issues have to be felt by the majority of the workforce. Okay. Now, the next thing is sort of map out what your workplace is. All right. So we all know how our workplaces operate. We know how many people work there, how many departments are there, how many supervisors are there, how many sort of managing directors, how many people who are in power. So it's going to be important when you look at organizing is to make sure that you map out, this is my workplace. These are many people here. These are the many departments. These are the shifts. If there are shifts in your workplace, but it's important for you to have that kind of information. All right. So you've talked to your coworkers. You've mapped out what the workplace is. Now, what's going to be important is to sort of recruit people to an organizing committee. And usually the organizing committee are you and your coworkers who are coming together, talking about what the issues are, putting those issues on a sheet of paper, and presenting those issues to management at some point. But it's important to have an organizing committee composed of your workplace of your coworkers, because as you build more and more, you're going to need that sort of majority of people, and we're going to come back to that. Okay. All right. So when you're organizing, all right, so let me give you an example. All right. So there was a grain mill in Lafayette, Indiana. Okay. Now I was working with the workers there, right? So they had an issue, particularly when COVID came around, right? And what they did is they identify what the issues are. So it's important for us to do that. All right. Whatever you do, you identify what the issues are. Those issues are felt by the majority of the people in the shop. Right. So the majority of people in this mill didn't know what was going on with COVID. And when COVID first hit, everybody freaked out about it. Okay. And there was no sort of real clear-cut guidelines from the corporation. Now, this was the Cargill Corporation that owned it. So I immediately sort of told the president, so boom, this is what you got to do. Okay. You have to identify what the issues are. Okay. That those issues are felt by the majority of the folks within the workplace. All right. That, people connect. They have some deeper understanding of what these issues are. And I think that that's going to be very important in terms of connects to a deep or persistent struggle, primarily because as you organize, it's going to be important for people to see that this is going to be maybe something on a long-term basis. So people cannot be involved in it just on a fleeting basis. They have to be something that they're committed to. Okay. Right. And the issue can be small. It could be a small issue. It could be an issue around scheduling. Okay. Our scheduling is totally screwed up at our workplace. Okay. Now, that affects me, but it may affect other people. And it may be some issue that people think is an irrelevant sort of issue. And you'd be surprised. And one of the things you guys are going to find out, you'd be surprised that, sometimes what you think is a minor and irrelevant issue becomes something very, very important to a lot of people. Right? And I've learned, I learned that a long time ago. Really, really sort of quick story. I was in this neighborhood. I was organizing around abandoned houses, right? And I came across this sort of this sex shop within the community, right? And I thought that, man, this is going to be the issue. People are going to yes, we're going to organize. I can just feel it. All right. And when I started door knocking around that sex shop, people would say, yeah, that's an issue, but this is what I'm more concerned about. So that was a secondary issue that they didn't even really care about whatsoever. They cared about what were some of their specific issues. And I learned that early on as an organizer. It's okay, you know what? some of the issues that they had were, I thought, were small issues, but it was felt by a majority of people. So as an organizer, these are the issues that you want to organize on. All right. So what's going to be important is sort of identifying what those demands are. Okay. If those issues are felt by the majority of the folks, they're connected, and they could be small everyday issues, but whatever they are, you have to make sure that you have very specific demands like coming out of that. All right. And we're going to talk about what are demands on the shop floor. Okay. What are some of the larger sort of demands within the industry, and what are some political demands? And when we talk about political demands, it's like using, it could be involving sort of like politicians into your sort of fight, or it could be around an issue like that people are really concerned about. An example there was a store in Seattle, and when the rebellion came out, they wanted to support the Black Lives Rebellion, so they sort of led a walkout of the place because they wanted to support the movement itself. So I think that was something that was really sort of like very important for what folks to do. Okay, all right. So hold on one second here.
Actually, I'm going to take this one quick moment. For folks who are following along with us, if you see a star in the corner of the slide, that means that you should be paying a special attention to what's on that slide, because it's going to be really helpful for the activity that we're going to be doing today.
So number 2 is sort of choose what your campaign target is. All right. And this is going to be very important for everybody. All right. The person should be the key decision maker. Now, you know what? Sometimes that key decision maker is a supervisor. Sometimes that key decision maker is a manager. And sometimes that key decision maker is the CEO. So really need to understand who are the people who have the power to give you what you want. Okay. So once people sort of develop what their demands are, these are the demands that we have. Who do we give it to? Now, sometimes initially what happens is you give it to sort of like either the manager or the supervisor of that, maybe the particular facility. But your overall target is the people who run the facility itself, primarily because they have the power to give you what you want. Okay. A supervisor is going to tell you, well, I can't do this because, that's the manager's job, right? Then you go to the manager says, whoa, listen, I don't have the power to do this. You have to go to the CEO, right? So it's important for you to actually know who are you targeting for this campaign, that, are these the people who make the actual decisions? And it's important for you to have that, because every target has a name and a face. Okay. You go high enough, there's always one person. Okay. Always. Maybe there's a couple of people, but it's always one particular person who has sort of like the power. So we need to understand that and really sort of like keep that in mind, that, there's one individual who has the power. Okay. And you know what? What's going to be important is, a lot of times there are people who run these corporations and stuff who have no sort of like understanding of what goes on the shop floor itself. Okay. So one of the things is, as you build strength, as you build power, as you build a majority of workers, you want to put pressure on those individuals. You want to let them see that this is a massive crisis and it's something that they need to definitely address. And I think that goes back to, understanding who are the people who have the power to deal with this issue. Okay. And you know what? Let's make things rough for these, the folks with the power as well. As I said before, you want to get the majority of folks within the workplace on board. The only way to really show power is to exercise that power by having the folks involved. Okay. All right. So you've organized. All right. So you talk to your coworkers. All right. You sit down and form an organizing committee. Based on the organizing committee, you develop a list of demands. Okay. Now, then you know what, like based on those demands, you know who's the decision maker who can like give you what you want in terms of what your demands are. Okay. So how do you escalate the action itself? Okay. How do you get more people involved? How do you really put some heat on like your target itself? Okay. Now, there are some ways, and let me just go through them really quickly. People have a petition. They have a petition delivery. They march on like the boss. They give the boss sort of their demands, as well as a timetable for implementation. This is going to be important in terms of always making sure you have a timetable. All right. There are strikes and walkouts. You know what? There have been a lot of times, even like before COVID, that there were situations that people sort of got together and sort of walked out. Okay. And you know what? If you have a majority of your like comrades and co-workers involved in this, then that makes sense. But you want to make sure you have a majority of people before you really move into that sort of like avenue in terms of strikes and walkouts. Okay. Phone banking and like email zaps, you know, that's like a low level, you know, non-confrontational like tactic that can be utilized. Sometimes some people are really gung-ho to challenge the power structure. Some folks want to take it a little slow. So, you know, you can like build patterns of escalation as you move through it, okay? Contacting elected officials, really important, and particularly like, you know, elected officials can like put pressure on the targets itself. The one I like personally is pickets. Mm-hmm. Because what a picket does, it's sort of, you're exercising the power that you have. This is really important, to exercise the power that you have. And you know what, with the majority of people in the workplace involved in this, a picket really is good. Okay. All right. And you know what, you can go to like the media, have a media press conference. You know what, one of the things is, you know, writing a press release and putting in like the issues is not hard. You know, there are a lot of people out here who can help you, but you know what, if there's an issue, you have a demand, you have a target, you have like a timetable for them to implement it. All right. You put that in some a simple sort of press release, get some press on there. Of course, right now, you know, with the social media, just, you know, blasting this thing on social media is like really important. And I've seen like campaigns go viral just based on like a tweet or an image. So it can definitely like go viral, and it can put a lot of pressure on like the bosses itself. Okay, particularly when it's like spread all across the globe. And the other thing, finally, is like you file an like unfair labor practice with the National Labor Relations Board. Okay, and what that is like, you know, we have the National Labor Relations Act, we have the National Labor Relations Board, primarily designed to protect workers. Okay, and they use this terminology called concerted activity. So what you guys are doing in terms of, you know, delivering a petition on the boss, marching on the boss, strikes, walkouts, phone blasts or emails, pickets, going to an elected official, are all protected under concerted activity, okay, within the National Labor Relations Act and the National Labor Relations Board. Now, they're supposed to be there to help workers. You know, over the years, they done screwed more workers than they've helped, but they can be pushed to do a lot more. Okay. And I was in North Dakota, Minot, North Dakota. I don't know if anyone here has been to Minot, North Dakota. There's absolutely no reason to go. Wonderful place, but no reason to go. And we had a trial. We had a National Labor Relations Board trial where we had a federal judge like to come out. And you know what, we had all of our witnesses together about, you know, the company using this this unfair labor practice to try to stifle like organizing at the facility. And we won. So you know what, one of the rare times that you know, we can get like a victory from the National Labor Relations Board. I wish it was in Chicago and not North Dakota, but hey, it was in North Dakota, so I'm happy with it. All right.
Before we move on to the next slide, I'm just going to drop into the chat right now the link to this video that we have here on the slide. And if everybody can just take 2 minutes. So just for folks, before you start, press play on this. So this is a recording of a March on the Boss petition delivery, letting a boss know that folks are going to be filing for a union with Unite here in, I believe, New Haven. And as you're watching this video, take note about just like take note about like who is doing what are some of the roles that you can be pulling out and identifying here, and what you sort of see as being like intentional in this process. Okay.
N'a souffri, y a fait nous passer misère, y a touyer nous. Nous demandons un changement. Pour nous un changement.
Estamos cansados de la explotación laboral en este trabajo. Los jefes no nos respetan, nadie nos escucha, necesitamos más aumento, necesitamos respeto, necesitamos...
We need more, better insurance, better wages, not work like donkeys in all the departments doing one person 50 jobs.
The main reason why I wanted the union is because I need affordable health care. I have not had health care in the past 2 years.
We need more staffing and we need respect. We don't want no managers yelling.
We need this, and we need this for everyone because everyone is struggling right now.
We need affordable health care. We cannot afford the health care being broke. We need job security.
We demand that you respect our decision to organize. Please do not interfere or try to intimidate us for our decision.
All right, thank you. This is a letter.
No, please do not break the law.
I feel good because they're coming to help people over there. They really abuse people over there.
I'm so happy parce que m'a passé misère longtemps.
Awesome. So yeah, just very quickly, the one big main thing that I wanted to and the reason why we use this video that I wanted to pull out from this, one thing that you'll notice is that every person in there who spoke was prepared and ready, and the crowd knew who was going to be speaking. You know, people were parting the seas in order for folks to be able to get to the front to that boss. None of these marches on the boss, nothing like this ever happens by accident. It is always intentionally planned, and somebody actually, you know, does a run through. They lay out a timeline. They go through the actual process of building something like this. So we'll get to that in a later slide. But Elsie, take it away.
All right, thank you. Okay, so let's go back to your coworkers, all right? And I got like a pop quiz for you guys. You know, it says talk to your 0, 2s, and 3s, okay? Does like, can anyone tell me what a 0, 2, and a 3 is?
Brendan, go ahead.
So a 0 is someone who is unassessed. You don't know really how they feel one way or another about organizing. A 3 is someone who is kind of on the fence. They, you know, might be broadly supportive or supportive in a conversation, but they haven't taken steps really to organize. A 2 is an activist, someone who has taken concrete steps towards whatever the goal is, whether that's signing a petition or signing a card.
Okay, all right. Yeah, very good, Brendan. Okay, and you know, in most sort of like fights that you're going to be in, the majority of people that you're going to have are going to be 2s and 3s. And you want to make sure that particularly with the threes, in terms of, well, you know what is preventing them from being a part of this sort of like struggle itself? What are some of their issues? And there's some folks who are like a 4 who like don't care, don't want to be involved, and he'll totally ratch out to the bosses. So always be really leery, and everyone within their workforce knows who those people are. So you don't really need to be reminded of that, but it's as important to make sure that everyone that you talk to, there is an assessment of that individual itself. That is this individual like someone who would be supportive of this? Is this a person who wants to be who would be a part of the organizing committee? Is this a person who will also be there when we march on the bosses? So those are important to have those sort of assessments, because the assessments sort of indicate how strong you are as a group. So based on those assessments, all right, well, we have, 42s and maybe 5 or 6 threes. So we know what we have, but it's going to be important as you build your organizing committee to have those sort of concrete conversations and make assessment of itself. Okay. All right. So number 2, all right? So people won't act unless they want to see change. And that's going to be really important, okay? And what happens is a lot of times in certain fights, all right, there's this one charismatic individual who's moving things, who's like, the loudest person in the room, who's passionate about everything. And a lot of times people sort of go along with that person, okay? When you find somebody who is incredibly passionate, so sometimes that passion sort of, it rubs off on other people, like, yay. But, they're not like, yay. They're like, yay. You know what I mean? And it's going to be important for you to make sure that, that people are invested in this fight, invested in this sort of struggle. It's not people that's going along with you because, you're charismatic, you're smart. All right, you feel that this is an important issue. So it's really important to make sure that the majority of people within the workplace are supportive of this issue, and that they feel something beyond just, yeah, that's an issue. It's more of like, okay, this is an issue. What are we going to do about it? And then organizing committee sort of presents, these are what our demands are, and this is what we can do about this issue. And it's more important to make sure that people are heard, that their issues are incredibly relevant, and you make sure that their issues are relevant and that their issues are heard. So it's important to do that. You don't want people to be just dragging along with you. All right. I've been with other organizers who, they move people around a specific issue, but it was their issue that they moved the people to. Okay. But it never went anywhere because the escalation was only based on the charisma of that particular organizer, and the people were not sort of vested in the issue at all. It was his issue. It wasn't their issue. All right. They went along with it. All right. And they weren't very successful primarily because, it was not something that they were really invested in. It's important to make sure that people are invested in the fight. Okay. Right. And one of the ways to do that is to agitate folks, really understand why they're involved in the fight itself. And I think that one of the ways to really do that is to address what their issues are. Okay. And sometimes people have multiple issues. So, if you're going to have an organizing committee and you're going to have demands, they could be multiple sort of demands, but, there are short-term and long-term demands as well. So, try to win some of those short-term and then maybe mobilize around for some of the long-term sort of demands. Okay. Mm-hmm. Another thing, let me just go back really quick. Okay. You know what? Don't promise people anything, okay? All right? There's no guarantees in this whatsoever, all right? This is a collective struggle. So people need to understand it's a collective struggle, okay? So you can't promise people that we're going to win. You can't promise people that, the bosses are going to capitulate. Well, one of the ways to get the bosses to capitulate is to have the majority of the workforce involved, okay? So, all right, okay? So as you guys prepare for an action itself, okay, so you had your organizing committee meeting, you guys have laid out what your demands are. Those demands are like on paper, okay, and you sort of talk about, okay, all right, how do we sort of exercise our power, all right? And what's important is, and this thing about structure sort of testing, it's going to be important to sort of lay out what you are going to do. Okay, so if we're going to do an action, if we're going to like, you know, march on the boss, so how are we going to march on the boss? As you saw in the previous video, you know, everyone was like there, all the workers were like together. They knew who was going to be their spokespersons. You know what? They knew when to cheer, they knew when to boo. All right. So when you have any sort of like tactic like this, you need to understand, all right, what are we going to do? All right, how are we going to do this? Okay, as like Tristan said, you know what, the March on the Boss that Unite Here did was something that was organized and planned. So it wasn't, you know, sometimes, you know, you can get away with spontaneity. Okay, but in the real world, you know what, even with spontaneity, someone has to seize the opportunity to sort of present a demand. Okay, so it's important to have this sort of like preparation in place, all right? And, you know, they're making sure that people have assignments, all right? So it's like, you know, someone like to write what the demands are, okay? And really sort of talk to people, ensure that, hey, these are the demands that they want the bosses to address. If you're going to do press, you have someone like to do the press release, and you have someone to like talk to the press. It's just important that, you know, you make sure that people are taking specific roles in whatever they're doing. Okay. And all right, so let's just go to sort of like a couple of roles. Okay, so you know, you wanna assign people like action roles. As we saw in that video, you know, there are some folks who are actually sort of giving the demands itself. So you have one or two folks like that. You have like a person give a passionate sort of speech about how they're being affected by whatever issues that are going on within the workplace. Okay. Then, you know, that you know, you do your reconnaissance. You know, you make sure that, okay, you know what, we know when the boss is going to be in. We know what time like they come in. Maybe they come in like you know, maybe once a month for a meeting or something like that. So you'll know, okay, these are the times to do it. All right, and you want to like create a timeline. And, you know, you want to like create a timeline that's sort of like, it's an escalation timeline that, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to march on the boss this day. Okay. And like, if they don't give us our demands in a week, because you always have a timetable, we're going to like, you know, go to their house and march on their house or something like that nature. But you should lay out specifically what you're going to be doing on like over the next maybe 3 to 6 months. Usually, in terms of a timeline, it's usually about 3 to 6 months that you sort of lay out. And some of them are longer and some of them can be shorter just based on the demands itself. But rarely do people stop at one demand. They win one demand, that's it, we're all happy. No, it usually sort of escalates beyond that, okay? You make sure that all your materials are like prepared. So mainly the materials are any sort of flyers, any sort of fact sheets around the demands itself. That's sort of so people understand them. And if there are questions that may come up, people can like, you know, address the like the materials in terms of what the demands are. Okay. And you want to set sort of clear like goals. It's like important to know, all right, what are we doing? And you know, the only way to know what we're doing is to say, these are what our goals are, right? And we want these issues addressed by management on this timetable. And if they don't, we escalate beyond that. And we're going to talk about sort of like escalations as well, okay? Public appeals, all right? You know, we like media advisories, press contacts. One of the things is that as we talked about, as you saw that video, you know what, there are people who are prepared to speak. So you want to make sure that you have folks who are prepared to speak to the media if you go down that road itself. Okay. Right? And one of the ways to do that is, sort of role playing, sort of like a conversation, not only with the bosses, but also with the media, or with like an elected representative who's going to be there to support like the fight itself. So it's important that, you and the organizing committee sort of sit down and really sort of understand here, this is what our goals are. Here the people can give us like what we want. Like when we go into these meetings, these are the issues we want to like address, and stick to those sort of issues. And one of the ways to do that is to do role plays and really sort of like work with each other to have those kind of discussions. Okay, right? And okay. So, we're back. All right. And the last thing is like, set an immediate opportunity to sort of have a debriefing about how things went. So let's just say that, hey, you know what? We've agreed to go and march on the boss. Okay, we're going to march on the boss on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Okay, we are going to demand like hazard pay. We're going to demand 5 days paid days off. All right, you know what? We're gonna demand like they buy us new uniforms. All right, so those are the demands. So you've gotten those. You march on the boss. You've sort of given people their assignments. Okay, so you know what? You're going to do this. You're going to do that. You're going to do this. Okay, so people have their assignments and they actually execute those like assignments. Okay, so you know what? Like it's important to like afterwards have a debriefing and see how things worked. Did things go the way we wanted them to go, or they didn't? And discuss why are those reasons that they didn't go well, or they did go well. Okay, and that's going to be important in terms of like having a debriefing in terms of how things actually went. Okay, like a long time ago they would call it a summation. We'll have a summation of like the event itself, and that's just pretty much sort of like a debriefing about what happened. Did we get what we want? If not, how do we move forward? Okay, all right. So
great.
When you
sorry, go ahead.
Okay. All right. And so are we ready to move forward? I mean, that's one of the sort of the basic questions that you want to ask. So here's some of the like ways you can answer that question is, how many coworkers are organizing with you? And that's going to be really important. All right, because if you're going to escalate, what's going to be important is having a majority of people within the workplace who are in support of this issue. Now, if the majority of people are in support of this issue, and you say that, all right, we're going to put these like demands, we're going to turn our issues into demands, and we're going to put them on a piece of paper. Okay, so you need to understand, well, what are our demands? What are we asking for, right? And there have been a lot of campaigns where sometimes people ask for, way too much, and sometimes people don't ask for enough. So it's important to have sort of a basic sort of organizing like demands that are felt by the majority of people at the workplace that, can be addressed by management or, the CEO, right? And has like a pattern of escalation, right? Because if we don't win this when we march on the boss, then what do we do next? Okay, right? And what's going to be important is who is the target, okay? So, there's been campaigns where the manager was like the target, okay? And then people went after the manager, all right? And the CEO fires the manager, right? And so they think that, okay, well, the manager has been fired. So all of our issues are resolved because primarily our issues is around this individual. Okay, and that's not true. All right, even though they may gotten rid of the manager, the issues that galvanize people are still going to be occurring. And the big bosses decide that, well, you know what, we fire this guy, that ends like our issue. Okay, it's always good to have a good villain to sort of get people organizing around a particularly good villain. And I've seen some really rotten rat bastard managers who were just really good villains and really helped us a lot in terms of getting people organized, primarily because they're just such horrible human beings. Okay, now once you have your demands together, once you know who your target are, once you formed an organizing committee, and this organizing committee sort of lays out what the demands, you guys find out, all right, this is our target, okay? And you're gonna plan an action against that person, okay? Well, you know what, how does this action relate to what your demands are? And so let me explain that one, okay? So it's simplistically, if we're talking about COVID, if your demands are around hazard pay, if your demands are around PPEs, if your demands are around 5 day paid 5 paid work days, all right. So those are very simple sort of demands itself. Okay, so whatever action you do plays into what those demands are. Right. So whatever action you have, all right, relates to what the demands are. Okay. Now, if you had a demand where there was you want changes in the schedule, or there was some overtime issues like that, well, how are you going to present those to the bosses itself? Okay. All right. And then you ask your question, what is the goal of the action that we are doing? And that goes back to number 2. Okay. Number 2 are what are the demands? Okay. So the goal should be to win those demands. Whatever those demands are, that should be what the goal is. Okay. Now, to win that, how many of our coworkers do we need to win this? Okay. So if you're in a facility that's 50 people, and it's only 2 of you who are passionate about this issue, well, obviously you're not going to really move forward much because you don't have the majority of the workforce involved in this. So it's important if you go back to number 1, okay, so are you ready to move forward? Okay. And one of the ways that you can, ascertain that is to go through this sort of process. All right. How many coworkers are part of our organizing committee? How many of my coworkers feel passionate about this particular issue? All right. Based on this issue, what are our demands? All right. We put those demands on a piece of paper. Well, who has the power to give us what we want? Who is our target? Okay. And how does this action we're going to do relate to what our demands are? Okay. So if you have a demand around hazard pay and PPEs and 5 days off, right? Okay, so those are very specific demands, but you know what? You want to relate those demands to what the action that you guys are doing. Okay. And you know what? How many people are on board on this? It's going to be really important. And I stressed that in our first when I first spoke, that you want to have a majority of your coworkers on board on any sort of fight. So usually we say somewhere between 75 to 85%. Right? And that varies from industry to industry. But what's important is that you had a majority of folks involved. Okay, moving on.
Thank you folks all for coming, and let's get back into the debrief. If you do have to go, we will see you next week. But if you can stay, please stay.